stumbled into an evangelical church that one of his employees invited him to church with him. It's a 300-person church in Platte. It's called Placerita Bible Church. And something miraculous happened there, and he's under really good teaching from a young pastor who I'm in touch with, named Adam.
I've wondered about, once I saw what was happening, about his messaging seems to be something that would be really effective and sort of an entree for what we do with the Gospel Story Arc Project in Japan.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any way, but what you think about that for one, and if you think that would be a good idea, is there any way that you could play a role in getting him there to share the gospel?
Yeah, I actually had him lined up to play in Hawaii. A friend of mine does the Hula Bowl every year in Hawaii, and so he was willing to do it. Kanye was. We just couldn't. There wasn't enough time, and he basically that operation requires about $1 million to move. It's not because he's greedy. It's just that he's got this massive choir, and it's 40 or 60 or 100 people. So it's basically $1 million operation to move him to wherever. And but he was willing to do it. We just couldn't put it together in time. But yeah, I think I don't.
Japanese young people, I think, would flock.
I don't know. How is Kanye in Japan? What is the following like? Does anybody know?
I don't know. All the young people.
It's not huge.
They like
not
Ariana
huge.
Grande.
Yeah. But could be interesting.
I was thinking the same thing. He's doing gospel music now, and it's amazing music. And so I just thought, wow, I think he would have an impact on the Japanese, not with his old stuff, but with his new stuff that he's doing.
Yeah. Well, the old stuff had like I said, traces of it too. Jesus Walks is there's a line in Jesus Walks that I forgot, but he was, you could tell he definitely he knew what he was doing. I think this teaching that he's getting now, this really solid Bible teaching that he's getting from this pastor has made all the difference. It's not kind of, cultural Christianity in the African American church or even in white churches. It's more like straight up. And he's a young guy. I think he's like in his 30s, and he travels with Kanye. They do them together. Sometimes he preaches at Kanye's shows. So yeah, check it out. But yeah, I think this is not a. The funny part too to me is Kim Kardashian's dad was a very devout Christian in Hollywood, believe it or not, and so I think he's getting a good laugh out of this because he passed away a few years back. I'm sure he's in heaven going, finally, yes, my family's getting straightened out. My friend Chris Christian was Robert Kardashian's best friend, and I once asked Chris, what would the dad think if he saw this reality show? And my friend Chris pauses and he goes, if he were alive, there would be no reality show. So, they've had a pretty negative influence on our culture, but I think this is beginning to turn around. And it's funny to see Kanye leading his family now. He's starting, in this episode of the show a while back, he's telling his wife to cover up more, and you're dressing too sexy, and she's like, what do you mean? You taught me all this. What are you talking about? And he's like, well, yeah, that was before. And so she's starting to cover up more. He kicked all the TVs out of his kids' rooms. He's like, I don't want my daughters having access to the TV 24/7. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see him trying to take the leadership of his family after leading it in a bad way. But that's what the gospel does. So I think as long as he hangs around this pastor that I mentioned to you, I think it's going to be good. In the column that I will send into Newsweek next week. So if you get a chance, check it out at newsweek.com. I just talked about the Bob Dylan, Kanye West similarities, and one of the things with Bob Dylan, I think it's pretty clear that he still is a believer, but he really was confused by watching the lives of Christians, especially evangelists and pastors. And there was two things in particular that happened. One, he was doing shows in San Francisco, and when you're in that Kanye, Bob Dylan early stages of conversion, you're just so excited about the gospel. You're just like, let's go, the world for Christ. And everyone else is like, yeah, calm down. In a couple of years, you'll calm down. But in his zeal, he told his assistant, who was a friend of mine, go to San Francisco and get all the churches to pass out tracts outside my concert, because I'm going to play there for like 7 nights. So his assistant went to San Francisco and talked to the pastors, and they all said, well, who else is doing it? And they said, well, Methodist and Baptist, and each denomination said, well, we can't do it if they're doing it. Like, we can't work with the Baptist and the Methodist, like, and he came back to Bob and said, well, they won't cooperate with each other. Like, and Bob was like, what? We're all on the same team, like, let's all work. They wouldn't do it if another church was involved. They had to be their church only. So then Bob said, well, why don't the Methodists have Tuesday and the Baptist, it's like night per night, and they wouldn't do that. So that's really confusing to a new believer. It's like, what in the world, what team have I signed on to here?
That's in Japan, that happens too, the
Yeah.
churches don't like to work.
Yeah, and so that, and then also, I think another thing was just seeing the lifestyle of some of the televangelists he was hanging out with, and there was one in particular, just crazy, private jets, private everything, and that was really disconcerting to a new believer like he was. And so I think that caused him to just withdraw from a lot of Christians and try to figure this out on his own, and so he lost a lot of fellowship, I think. So, so again, coming back to a theme here, back to the importance of really solid pastoring and mentoring, and realizing that artists and pastors are very different, and that's good. And they both have something to offer each other too. But yeah, let's see what, I definitely have the lines of communication there, and I have thought about how we would do Japan, but yeah, we'll see where that leads. Others?
Can you talk about, say, when we do the MA, and we're meeting lots of non-Christian filmmakers,
Yeah.
and we do as Christian group to offer that space. So I'm part of it, so I can see how it is and what it is, but it maybe, I'm just hoping that in some ways that would be something to help for the people to see, you don't have to be, in some ways, you don't really have to be filmmaker to talk about film with the other filmmaker who's not Christian, or vice versa.
Mhm.
It's just like there is some venue, right, to be able to have interaction with those kind of filmmakers or actors.
I think you experienced that this last time. We had the film festival in May in Tokyo, and I think that Izumi in particular did a lot of follow-up with people who came to the festival. And I think they understood kind of that Christians were behind it, and yet I hope they felt welcome.
Oh, they did.
Even though, getting a chance to, and in the early years of our film festival, we had some opposition from Christians who would say, why are you giving, a platform to New Agers or Buddhists or whatever? But, I think that's, again, as I said yesterday, that is sort of the price of admission in a conversation. The price of me being able to tell you what I believe is I have to listen to what you believe. That's just sort of human common sense, but we've lost that idea. So yes, it's a chance for others to share their point of view. But I think we in this room can be confident that we know the truth, and so God is big and he's not threatened by other points of view. And if that's the price that I have to pay to share what I believe is to listen to you, that's an easy price for me to pay. Now it means we have to be strong in what we believe, right? So we're not swayed necessarily, but I think that's kind of the premise of what Izumi dealt with. And after we all went home to America, she was continuing in conversations with people who were hopefully asking questions and had been challenged to think in new ways. Plus, it's just sort of, in Japan, everybody's so nice, so it's good to be good citizens, and in some way they are looking at us, to see if we're going to be polite, and as they are so polite and gracious. And when we're not, they notice that. Trust me, they notice that. Oh, gee, those Christian Americans can be rude or whatever. So it's almost like in Japan you have an extra pressure to treat people with respect, and we should be doing that anyway, but even more than normal because they're such hospitable people and so gracious and friendly. If there's ever an argument for people can be good without God, it's the Japanese, right? They're just naturally almost such nice people. But part of that is that they, in some way, through the Bushido Code and other things, have the Ten Commandments ingrained in their culture in a different way. And so they've been living by a lot of those rules. So it's not just a natural state, but they've had for 2,000 years a form of the Decalogue in their culture. If you read the Bushido Code, it's fascinating. You know, it really does almost feel like it flows directly from Moses, or indirectly. Yeah.
So in the US, we have, I think more so now than before, these Christian movies coming out, or more, I guess, Christian films being put out. Do you think there's something possible like that in Japan, or?
Yeah, in some ways, I've been a part of this for about 20 years, and so I've really tried not to have it be genre eyes. That's been part of my work, is to keep that from happening. And I think we've been sort of successful. For instance, we do show these movies in movie theaters, right? If there's actually been a movement to try to get churches to be first-run movie theaters for Christian movies. And that's the kind of thing that, in my estimation, is a huge mistake. It's important to take up space at the AMC 14 with whatever Kendrick movie is coming out, just to annoy them, just to annoy the second. But it is important that it takes place, at least it's in physical proximity for a non-Christian to come, even if they think they're corny and won't come. At least we haven't made the mistake of removing ourselves physically from that. So I don't think the church theater thing is catching on, so that's good. Most churches don't have enough going on, they don't want to be a movie theater too. Popcorn in the seats and all that entails. So at least physically we're in theaters and it's functioning. There is still kind of a stigma that's attached that, again, put on my non-Christian hat. I was a non-Christian for 5 years, so it's hard to remember, but put on my non-Christian hat. It's like, yeah, I don't want to go to a quote-unquote Christian movie. In fact, I had written an article once, I wish I could remember the exact quote. I wrote an article once about the stigma that's created when a movie is called a Christian movie because it makes non-Christians not want to see it. And this self-proclaimed witch wrote in the comment section, no, keep them separate so that I'm not fooled and don't go into a Christian movie by accident. I was like, that is a great affirmation of what I just wrote.
Yeah.
In her mind, she doesn't want to get tricked and go to a movie and find out, oh crap, it's one of those movies. She likes the generations. And it was like, I went to her Twitter following and it was like, witch. So I think the more we can encourage almost like an association of filmmakers who are Christians that are connected to each other, but then are working in the Japanese film industry, I think that would be the goal, the ideal. But stay in contact. It's important that we all know who each other are. Even the fact that I was able to get Narnia to Disney in that partnership was because I had a friend named Rick Dempsey, who was the vice president of Disney. And so just us knowing each other meant I brought Narnia to him, and then we said, let's work together, and that's how the whole thing came. So I think if we can create that network of artists in Japan who are Christians in every area, film, television, music, books, whatever, and then work together, as opposed to creating a separate entity that only caters to the church.
Yeah, maybe a better way to say that was maybe inspirational stories.
Yeah.
Instead of Christian genre, but
Yeah, they are getting out there. I mean, as I mentioned last night, because Sony has this Affirm label, which is kind of a Christian film imprint, overseas it does have the ability to bring those films in. So Risen, there's been 4 or 5 movies that have come out through the regular theater chains.
Do you know if there is any Christian Japanese filmmakers or even people?
Yeah, there have been some over the years. What was it? There was a Japanese Yakuza movie a couple of years back. You guys remember that one? I should have a copy somewhere. It's a story. It's a pretty violent movie, but it's a story of how some Japanese mobsters found Christ. So they do kind of find their way. Back in the 70s, there were Billy Graham Japan movies that were made. There was a movie made about, remember the story of the guy who threw himself in front of the train to see Shiokari Pass. So
Yeah, and they won't release that.
Oh, really?
I mean,
Who won't?
Billy Graham Association. I've tried and tried and tried. We could use that in our ministry.
I have a VHS. I'll just give it to you and
Stick it on
put
YouTube.
it on YouTube. No, I do have a VHS. of it.
Yeah.
But they won't allow you to use it?
Yeah, I mean,
Who do you
well-
talk to over there?
I'd be surprised.
so I've talked to people that work in the Samaritan's Purse organization.
Well, that's different
Yeah,
from
we
BGA.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, this
Let me know
guy
if I
is-
can help you, because
Okay,
I
that
had a
would be
BGA as
wonderful.
a friend, and I mean, I don't know why they would hold it up, but
Because we could use it, we use story for paradigm juxtapositions.
how would you use it? How would you use it?
Well, we would show it, but then.
What's preventing you from showing it right now? Is there a legal
The
prohibition?
quality of the copy that I have
Oh, I see.
is pretty poor. It was not just a VHS copy bought in a store, it was a VH copy that somebody recorded.
Well, let's hook up afterwards. I got a clean VHS copy.
There we go. There we go.
If the BGA wants to come to Japan and sue you, then
Yeah,
we'll.
there we go.
No, the head of BGA is a good friend. I mean, Franklin is the head of it, but his
Yeah.
number 2 guy is a friend, and I'd be happy to help if I can.
So when you're saying like Christian filmmaker, are you talking about the theater, home theater, or like the Christian who is making films? Japanese Christian filmmaker, you mean like?
Yeah, I mean, films being produced in Japan that have sort of these spiritual underlying tones, not, you know.
We had a lot of them in the festival.
Yeah.
We had a number of, I mean, they're all shorter films.
Yeah.
But I think we had a couple of dozen films, and some were made by missionary type groups. And the short film is often, it's often the first step toward a feature. So
Mhm.
some of those, we could come alongside some of those with funds. And again, just to be good to find folks that, I have this conversation in North America with people that have, these sort of Christian and conservative groups have put millions and hundreds of millions of dollars into political activism. And I'm like,
Mm.
how's that work for you guys? Because they don't really value storytelling, but they will fund political activity. And it just hasn't been very effective.
Right.
So I think that the more we can identify people who do have wealth and are willing to use it in some non-traditional ways, So if you find your Uncle Hank, who's got a couple $1 million and wants to impact Japan, instead of sending it through the normal organization, let's try something different. Let's get behind some filmmakers and do some interesting things. I often share, and again, not to pick on that community, I'm really not picking, I'm really saying it in an admiring way. The LGBT community has done an amazing job in the US, and we should really study everything they've done, because just by telling stories. Vice President Biden credited the TV show Will and Grace with changing American policy on marriage. It's a silly little sitcom. It's a very important part of storytelling. I think of Uncle Tom's Cabin. When Abraham Lincoln met the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, he's said to have said, "This is the little lady who started this great war." It's a silly little novel, but it's not. It's the book that made people go, "Wait a minute, what are we doing here? This is crazy. We have slaves, they're God's creations, and we're treating them like this," and it caused people to really understand how evil slavery was. You go ahead.
Yeah, I have one last question, maybe it'll be short enough that we can get more, but you touched on people saying, "Oh, I don't want to watch a Christian film because it could be done poorly. Even Christians don't like Christian films because it's cliche." And you've seen a lot of films that have been submitted to your festival. When you eliminate films, like the Christian films that don't make it, what is like the common thing that you see is the mistake?
Yeah, not trusting the viewer is the huge one. Occasionally you'll see it with non-Christians, but mostly it's us. The whole Bible verse at the end, or I'll often see in the credits, they'll come back with a main point they made earlier and put it in the credits again. Like, in case you missed it the first time, it's in the credits again. Like, that's a pretty common thing that will happen. And again, not trusting the viewer, not trusting God, not trusting the art works, trying too hard to come back at the end, with the closer. So that's probably the biggest one. And then the second is just, as I said earlier, just not enough emphasis on the craft, right? Somebody was saying the other day, like, Chick-fil-A is a great example. What was that? Did you ever see that line? Somebody posted about Chick-fil-A is a great example where non-Christians are eating a Christian product, but it's so great that they can't resist it. That the product is so good, right? It's like, it's not like, we're going to make the chicken, put a little effort. The chicken is so great that people overcome their hatred of Chick-fil-A and go eat it. Or even In-N-Out. They don't like Chick-fil-A culturally, but they love the chicken. So, that's the thing. Be so good at your craft that They may not like you or what you stand for, but they like the fact that you're the best at what you do. So, we got to hire her in spite of her wacky views. You know what I mean? But those are the two things that I would say are just a lack of emphasis on the craft and just like, oh, the story's so great, we don't have to worry about the craft. And the second is just not trusting the audience to get the message and trying too hard to hammer it back. Yeah.
I think you're familiar with the Moving Picture Institute,
Yes,
which they're a nonprofit that funds liberty-minded filmmaking.
right.
And I've applied and got grants from them and worked on stuff. They don't get anything out of it. They're not producers who get a return, and they're not winning souls. I mean,
Yeah,
they just believe in the message.
yeah,
Is there any Christian organization that does that? Gathers funds
yeah.
and gives it to artists to do good things?
The answer is no, but that's what we have to work toward. There's a group called Movie to Movement that could do that. It can receive funds. They're a nonprofit, so that's a good example. We need to find these people. So I'm relying on you guys to reach out to your uncles, your rich uncles. But we need to create that. And again, to step aside to a political context for just a moment. In a political context, George Soros puts $5 million into the Sundance Institute. So George Soros is not a filmmaker or a cinemaphile or a lover of film. He knows that for his beliefs to spread, he needs to do it through film. That's why he funds Sundance, and Sundance helps his ideas travel throughout the world. $5 million is a lot of money, right? So we need a Christian George Soros to say, you know what, I want to help fund that way. A friend of mine, Scott Derrickson, the producer of Doctor Strange, when he was in USC Film School, he noticed that when there was a gay classmate, the LGBT community would come around that classmate and help fund his college existence. Expenses, school costs, because they knew that if this guy grows up and becomes a great filmmaker, he's a chance for their ideas to spread throughout the culture. He didn't see Christians doing that for him at USC Film School. He was on his own. But I think the LGBT community, and some minority communities as well, I think African American community sometimes does a good job of coming alongside young leaders. But for most of the Christian community, it's, hey, good luck. Hope you succeed.
But I think a lot of...
Can't wait to watch your movie when it's in the theater. It's like, yeah, you might want to...
So that is kind of church for LGBTQ, though.
What's that?
That's their tithe,
Sure.
because the majority of the church gives to their church.
Right.
And they expect the church to do something, almost like we do with taxes.
Yeah.
They're going to take care of that. So
Yeah, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I had a chance to visit Justice Scalia before he passed away at the Supreme Court. And he said to me, things are decided in Hollywood where you guys are, and they come to us for ratification. I'm like, this is a very smart Supreme Court justice. It's like helpless in the face of popular culture. And so, and also just the LGBT community has done a good job of not, there is a gay channel, but for the most part, they've done a good job of staying in the mainstream, and they don't say, well, we can't be on CBS because we're too gay. Like, no, they're on CBS, they're on ABC.
the gay channel's not for non-gays, though.
Right.
It's like CBN.
Yeah,
Or-
they do a great job. Yeah, they do a great job of not being intimidated and sharing their stories, and we all laugh along. Modern Family or whatever, and they also make fun of themselves, like the characters on Modern Family. They're kind of funny to watch, and the gay squabbles or whatever, and they're not afraid to show their human side and allow us to laugh with them. Right? That's huge too, and so we have a lot to learn from the way they handle media to advance their beliefs and their values and the things that they care about. Well, I think we've reached right. Is there one last question? If not, we probably should. I got the 5-minute signal about 7 minutes ago. So thank you all for coming, and we'll keep